News and Talk, WAOK Black History Series.
Blackness, keep on.
Conversations with Derrick Boazman. On this episode, Derrick sits down with the daughters of the movement. Elisabeth Williams Omiilami, daughter of Hosea William. Sarah Elisabeth Langford, daughter of Arthur Langford Jr. And Atlanta City Councilwoman Andrea Boone, daughter of civil rights legend Reverend Joseph Boone. Derrick will examine the issues of the absent father, and so much more will be unfolded in this eye-opening interview. And now, Conversations with Derrick Boazman, featuring history makers, the daughters of the movement, on News and Talk 1380 WAOK.
Welcome to WAOK's Conversations with Derrick Boazman, our Black History Series. In this series, we're talking to those individuals who have made history, been an eyewitness to history, or are our living history. And today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the daughters of the movement. We have with us Councilwoman Andrea Boone, who is the daughter of the legendary Joseph Boone, a man who I learned so much from watching and got an opportunity to see how real leadership work as a 21-year-old trying to organize school bus operators, Andrea. And your dad shows up, Atlanta Public School bus operators were asking for a contract. And I was about 20, 21 years old, trying to be an organizer and working with these bus operators. And all of a sudden, we were at a school board meeting, and a cab pulls up, and this guy jumps out. He has his traditional collar on, Reverend collar. He's short, and he got out of the cab loud and boisterous and hollering power to the people. That was Joseph Boone. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here today. And with my friend, my cousin, Elisabeth, Liz, we pretty much grew up together. We know each other. Our fathers were very close, so I'm honored to be here today.
All right. We also, we call her the matriarch. I refer to Hosea Helps, the forerunner to Hosea Feed the Hungry and Homeless. The chairwoman of the Black Cross. You know, the larger community had the Red Cross. We have the Black Cross. Liz Williams Omiilami, the daughter of somebody everybody knew, Uncle Jose, as we affectionately call him. Hosea William. Liz, how are you?
I am doing wonderful today, and I'm so thankful that you call us together. As she said, we are cousins, but we don't get to spend much time together now. But I was always in her house. Growing up, I was always there with Reverend Boone and whatever movement or whatever cause it was. She has a beautiful mother, and is blessed to have her mother here with her, and so they are a permanent part of my memory.
We're just gonna have because I know both of you all so well. We really just having a fireside chat, and this was intended for our audience to really go behind the scenes to know who these men were and know a little bit about how the family worked. So let's start with you, Councilwoman Boone. Your dad, short in stature, full of personality. Talk about your dad.
Well, he did not drive, so I spent a lot of time with him. He drove for a little while, and then I think by the age of 10 or 11, we were all in the car together. And my father, we would, at night, make picket signs. My sister and I and other friends would be there making picket signs with plain cardboard and black markers, different colors. And we would end up that morning on somebody's picket line. And my mother would come after work and pick us up off of the picket line. We would jump in the car with her. She taught at Washington High School and John F. Kennedy Middle School. So around 3:30 or 4, we would get there at 9 a.m. in the morning. And about 3:30, my mother would pick us up. So that was just a way of life for us.
Your dad worked closely with King in the latter part of like King's movement. And I remember listening to one of the speech where he talks about protest. Your dad perfected protesting. He was the best at it, worked the bullhorn like you couldn't believe. But Dr. King, in one of his speeches, talked about he goes to, he calls out for your dad, and he calls out for Jesse Jackson, those companies that we're going to protest, that we need to boycott, seal tests, and he started calling the role of all of these companies. Tell us the earliest memory of your dad working with King in the movement and him being the go-to guy on how to shut a business down.
Well, my father was appointed chief negotiator of Operation Breadbasket by Dr. King, and my earliest memories are of them being in our home. Me and my sister and some of the other ministers, Reverend Creasy, Reverend Bennett, so many, Ralph Abernathy, so many ministers meeting at my mother's table. And it was called the Fellowship. And they would go to different houses and meet. And we would just watch them organize and plan. They were strategists. Yeah. They were strategists. And it was great because now I hear of so many stories of folks that say, hey, your father helped me get a promotion at Nabisco. Your father helped me at the Higher Regency. And it's just some wonderful, wonderful memories of how my father helped the least of these and helped African Americans rise up through the corporate ranks.
As I said, he could gather people. And both of you all are PKs, preacher kids. And Sarah, who will be joined by a little bit later, preacher kids. Did you understand as a young child the work that your father, Joe Boone, was? What did you understand about the world we were living in at that time as a young girl? And what did your father come to make you understand about the work he was doing?
I think what really I began to understand is how to help the poor, how to help those that were drug addicted. My father had a house near the Kroger on Donnelly Avenue called the Harambe House. And the folks there became our friends. It was in the 70s, and they became our friends. They were heroin addicts, and they would join our church. They were members of our choir, and we watched them clean their lives up. Just watched them clean their lives up. So that, helping those addicted to drugs, helping the blind. We had the first blind school on Sunset Avenue called the P.J. Wood Center for the Blind. That's right. We would pick them up in vans, take them to the grocery store. We would watch them learn how to cook and operate as blind in the city of Atlanta. So it was just a wonderful. I have so many great experiences.
Yeah. Joe Boone will become the pastor at Rush Memorial Congregational Church over in the Atlanta University Center. And he was one of the early ones to support the student sit-in movement, would always keep the doors open. Talk about his connection to the Atlanta University Center.
I was too little to see that, but I do understand that Lonnie King approached my father outside of Rush Memorial Church and said, Reverend Boone, we need somewhere to meet because the presidents of the AU Center were not open to the students protesting. They were not open to them strategizing on the campus. So our church is right on the campus, on the promenade. So Lonnie King then went and got Julian Bond. They met with my father, and from then on, I think they met at Rush Memorial for many years. People thought it was at Pascal's, but Rush Memorial was the first meeting place of the students.
Elisabeth Omiilami, your dad, Hosea Williams. People to this day didn't realize he was a Morris Brown graduate, so am I. But you all lived, he had created a life of comfort. He was a research chemist hired by the federal government, living in Savannah, Georgia. But he tells the story. He heard Dr. King and heard about the movement. And he said to your mother, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to work for our people. Talk about the early Hosea Williams, those early days in Savannah. Tough had a tough upbringing, but cashed it in order to work in the movement with Dr. King. Talk about that story and what he told you about, or what do you remember about how he joined the civil rights movement.
And it's so good to be here with Andrea, because as you talk with her as with me, as you talk with her and as with me, these pictures are flashing through our brains, and we're trying to figure out which one do we grab onto. And those early days in Savannah, he worked for the United States government as the first black to be hired in the United States Department of Agriculture, and she was the head librarian at Savannah State. And so, yes, we lived a life of comfort. We had school clothes, we had church clothes, we had breakfast fixed for us, lunches, went out to eat for dinner, had every Sunday, went and got ice cream, and, drove around in his Cadillac, because he had to have that. That was a status symbol for him. But we didn't know all that would come to a crashing halt. I called that my patent leather and lace socks days, because it wasn't to stay that way. And it began to change when we went for ice cream one Sunday, and then the person in the shop said, "We don't serve niggas here." Mm-hmm. And there he is with all his kids and his wife, and they had some kind of words back and forth, and we, of course, never went back there. My father quit his job with the United States government, because women those days, you just had to do what you had to do if they tell you to do it. She quit her job at Savannah State, and our house was used for the movement in Savannah, which got the eye of Dr. King, and he was saying that Hosea Williams was the man singly most responsible for integration in the Southeast, because it went from our living room to W.W. Law's home, all up the what they call Jekyll Island now, and I knew the Gullah people, and I knew their Creole cooking and all of that, because it all became a big circle. And Klan were burning crosses in our yard, and so every now and then you see a big black car drive by trying to threaten the house. So then from that moment, I lived in a kind of a fear, and I jumped right in. I went to, I'm sorry Amy didn't get you that picture. I went to jail the first time when I was 9 years old for picketing, and stayed in jail the weekend. But I didn't know what it really was. I thought it was just a group of all of us who were in here behind these bars. Yeah, I seen pictures of those. I was 9. I was eating bologna sandwiches and singing freedom songs. And I thought it was some kind of party. But indeed it was not, because people started getting killed, beat up, any word about helping with the movement. And Savannah then dictated the rest of his life.
Yeah. Would eventually, SCLC would founded in Louisiana, but came to Auburn Avenue, and you all would eventually move to Atlanta. What was that move like? Because by now your dad has decided, this is where I'm going to cast my lot. I'm going to work in this movement. And when did life change? You talk about the patent leather shoes and the pretty lace socks. When did it turn into something else and you say this is different? Or did you notice the transition that this is real? These people do not like my father. They don't like this movement. They don't like Dr. King.
Yeah, well, at that time, black people in the movement were sending their kids away to school. This was 65.
You went to Boggs Academy.
And I got sent away to Boggs Academy. And when I came home that first holiday, they had moved to Atlanta. So I just remember saying, what?
Yeah.
We live here now. Yeah, this is our home now, Elisabeth. So it'll be okay.
It'll be
My mother's calming voice. And that's where all these movements, when she talks about her house, they didn't need a space to strategize. They used their homes. They used their children to make picket signs. They used their wives to cook dinner for groups of people over and over again. This kind of civil rights leader was so close to the ground and close to the people that there was nothing fancy about them. Right. Now, my father was a chemist, and he had a chemical company. Yeah. So he used the money he made at his chemical company to fund the movements that he did and to take care of us.
Right. I knew that, but most people did not know that. I remember because I would sit with your father at either his Kirkwood office. He was on Hill Street for a moment, but he had Terry Enterprises. And I happened to just stumble into Home Depot. And I see all of these products, cleaning soaps, wiper fluid, all of these products, and it didn't connect to me. This is the Terry Enterprises that's over here on Walker Street. This is Hosea's. This is it. Yeah. He never made any noise to let people know about that.
But the neighbors kind of figured out because they were billowing smoke coming from the building occasionally, and they were like, "That Negro gonna blow us all up. What is he doing in there?" But he made these products from scratch. Yeah. They weren't like you pour two things together. It's like get the oranges, get the lemons, get the acid, get this and that, and here you have lemon orange floor cleaner, or you have lemon orange car wash. And we all worked at the chemical company. You know, I was working there every summer when I would come home from Boggs. You never questioned it. If your dad said make picket signs, you're like, okay, and you just sit down with the rest of your friends and make some. You never questioned it. You never questioned it.
Both of your dads, Andrea, as well as Hosea, I marvel at the incredible fortitude and strength. There was 3 or 4 men in the movement who I said, they're not Dr. King. These are men who are absolutely fearless. Joe Boone was one. C.T. Vivian was the other. And Hosea could be rough now. He was nice, but he did not suffer fools gladly. Hosea would get it. And people called him Little David. People didn't realize Hosea was not a very big guy. He was not, I don't think he hit 6 feet. He was not a big guy at all. But he would get in your face if you were not doing right by poor folks.
Such a strategy how he utilized everybody with their own. You got to have that person that's going to dig that fallow ground. You got to have that person going to go into a town and just start preaching and cussing and bring his staff and what y'all doing in this town? How are y'all letting them treat you this way? And then they get beat. Yeah. And then that blood calls in the media, calls in other staff members, and you got yourself a bona fide movement going on. But they didn't just jump out there and do things. It was tactics, strategies.
Back to Reverend Boone, a lot of verbosity. He was a presence. He was a force. When he showed up, you knew something was going to happen. I remember going back to that school board meeting. He comes in, and he goes up to Joe Martin, I think is the president of the school board, snatches the gavel out of his hand, started banging the gavel on the table and said, now the People's School Board is convened. the boy runs out the side door and he starts singing freedom songs. What made your dad so fearless? Where did that strength come from?
His background.
Tell us about his background.
And his father. My father was actually born in Cedartown, Georgia. And at the age of 3, in a 24-hour notice, his family moved to Atlanta from Cypress Terrace because my grandmother had gotten into an argument with the white owner of a grocery store. So they felt they needed to move to Atlanta that day. So my father saw his mother, who, Maddie Boone, had incredible strength for her family. My uncle was the first black commissioner of corrections in the United States. Graduated from Morehouse College, John O. Boone.
Oh, yeah, great man.
Great man. And I often wonder, how did she raise 2 giants? How did she raise 2 giants? My father went to E.R. Carter Elementary School and was a big football star at Booker T. Washington. Came back to coach, then went on to minister. He and my mother met at Anniston, Alabama, and were married. She's from Selma. But my father's background, his mother, the stories I hear about how his mother raised them, how she taught them, how they used to wear each other's clothing, just really made them who they were. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful soldiers.
When did you, Andrea, realize that this is really my dad? This is...
Watching TV.
You saw him on TV. Tell us about that.
A little girl would wait to see her father on TV because I knew he would be on TV. Mm-hmm. So at 11 o'clock, I would wait up. Everybody else was asleep. My mother, my sister, they did not stay up, but I would wait for him to come home. And he and I would watch him on TV pretty much nightly for a while. Yeah. Jocelyn Dorsey used to cover him. Monica Kaufman used to cover him. So watching him on TV, I knew that he was making a real difference. And just watching the people at Rush Memorial that came through, the people that were addicted to drugs, the folks that were homeless, the folks that needed help, they would always knock on our door and say, "Is Reverend Boone home?" Or come to the church and wait on him to finish preaching. And I would watch him help so many people, thousands. And then I would watch the big screen when he was at Nabisco and the Hyatt Regency, picketing grocery stores. Ed's Supermarket was in our community in Adamsville. He shut that grocery store down. Yeah. He shut that grocery store down. And I realized that he was just a beautiful, beautiful being. At home, he was gentle and kind and sweet and loving, and he spoiled my sister and I. And my father was also in business. We had Kmart plastic bags. Yeah. We used to produce plastic bags and had hundreds of jobs. We made shorts. We had a plant in Moultrie, Georgia. So he really believed in creating jobs, and we would have to make payroll every Friday. And then he would come back to Atlanta and preach on Sundays. And we would have youth fellowship with the neighbors. They would bring their children over. We had a church van. We had Sunday school. And we would go all the way to East Lake Meadows to pick up folks just to bring them back to our church. So just the memories of my father are just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I often wonder if my father would want a street name. I said, I don't know. I'm not sure if he would have wanted a street name because he wasn't the type of person that always looked for recognition. Yeah. But he all he wanted to do was help.
He deserved it and got it.
Yes, he got it.
Did your dad ever get any sense? He had to get a sense that you had the same servant heart because you have been in city government. You were faithful to Councilman, the late Councilman C.T. Martin, worked on his staff because he was very close to your dad. And I'm sure your dad whispered to him, take care of my baby.
It's almost like he placed me there.
Yeah.
He called him and said, my daughter needs a job. I want her to do something different. And I volunteered on CT's campaign as a phone banker. I did a great job. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to work full time, because I was working part-time at my father's business. But I began to love it so much, and being at City Hall for hours and seeing so many great people come and go. And CT was just a great, great, great person to work for.
Yeah,
just
great
the dean of
councilman.
council. And I watched his integrity, and I just began to love it. But it's like my father placed me there, and I've been there 32 years. This month will be 32 years in city government.
I don't believe you, but I know I've been there many of the same years. So I know. Liz, you get to see your dad. Hosea never knew where to sit. He had a problem just following people's instruction. Probably one of the biggest movements was Bloody Sunday. John Lewis, a number of them, but he principally, as I get the story, that they were told, because an injunction was out, do not march. Right. Dr. King came back up to Atlanta with the instructions, do not march, we'll go to court, and we'll get this injunction, stay lifted, and we'll march. But as I understand the story, that several of them, I don't know if Bevel was a part of that decision making, James Bevel. They said, well, look, we just going to march up to the bridge, look over. No, Dr. King and others don't want us to go. So we'll just come back. And that ends up being probably one of the most covered weekends of marching across the Edmunds Pettus Bridge. And it was probably the first time that national news broadcast just the slaughter and beating of just people who wanted to be free. And your dad is standing up front. John Lewis is there, and they take a beating like you wouldn't believe. I've heard him describe it. He said blood was flowing like a river. What did he tell you? We know what he said to us publicly, but what did he tell you about Bloody Sunday or any of those major marches that he led where violence was very much a part of it? And were you ever afraid that he wouldn't come back home?
Oh, absolutely. I saw very little of him some days, and then he'd show up at home. It's like, well, where have you been? And some of those times he was off making money. Some of those times he was off at meetings or off doing something else. But the fear, they wanted him to get a bodyguard, and he refused to. So I don't want anybody following me around trying to keep me safe, because God can keep me safe. And so he never would let them get him a bodyguard. And so he was not supposed to march in Selma. Dr. King had ordered that they do not march, but Hosea Williams was just a part of Selma. Those people were going to march that day. They didn't care what anybody said, because there was a huge movement going on in Selma before John Lewis and them and the staff got there. Lulu Williams, a female, was running that movement. And so since they were going to march anyway, well, let me just get up here and make sure they see me as the example. I've marched into police before. I've marched into a line of the state troopers before. Get up off your knees, look forward, and then move forward. Not knowing what was going to happen because of that fearlessness. And my father was full of anger, because when he got back from the war, he had been over there fighting for this country, and he tried to take a drink out of a white water fountain, and they beat him so bad that he was in the hospital 3 months. He was very angry with America. And he took it out through the ways that he did things. I mean, the largest march Georgia's ever had was the Forsyth County March. Yeah. When we rode down
I was there the second time.
Yes.
Yeah, I was there as a student.
Yes, and in buses. And
I'd never seen anything like it.
Vicious. Klansmen attacked us.
I'd never seen a Klansman in person until that march. I'd never seen it.
Really?
And when he went the first time,
it was
him
just
and Martin
20-something
Cook
of
and
us.
several, and they beat him, and we saw that. And
my son got beat.
And when he called for the second march, it just seemed like it would never end. People just kept coming and coming and coming.
But that was his role, and he understood it. And he didn't care. Him and his staff, their job was to get beat. Their job was to get whoever you can get in this town, and y'all march and aggravate the police. Sit at this lunch counter, go down there, start yelling at somebody, get this town shaken up so that we can come in and have a movement here, because now everybody's scared. So you got to preach the fear out of those people so that they will take their city back and we can have a movement. So it was nothing new to him to get beat in Forsyth. And then all these people come. If you notice, he wasn't even at the front of the march, the second march. You couldn't find him because he wasn't there for the cameras. But it was good that it happened because the Klan got to see, don't mess with this man and these scraggly group of people, because they know a lot of important people. Right. And it was amazing.
Andrea, you see your dad challenge governments, challenge systems, challenge the police, and you end up as a policymaker. Is your life an extension of his legacy?
Definitely. Definitely. It is truly an extension. And I hear him talking to me. I hear him guiding me all the time. I always take a break. If it's a tough situation, I'll take a break and say, now, what would my father want me to do? What would he want me to say? So, as you know, I was over the mayor's office of constituent services for nearly 8 years. And I think myself, people always say, you and Michael Langford did the best. But Michael Langford called me one day and said, you know what? I think you're better than me. So I knew then that I had done a good job, and I was proud when Michael Langford called me and said, I think that you have done better than me. And I said, oh, no way. He said, I'm telling you. And I knew then that I had done a good job in that role, and I always listen to what my father has to say. And when people come all the time and say, hey, I remember when your daddy this, just stories about our parents, they feel our lives now. It's still, their legacy lives on.
Let's go behind the movement and go to the men. Liz, you say there were times when he wasn't at home. Talk about that, because a lot of movement children, movement kids, have a real resentment that dad was not here. Was there ever a time where you regretted that he was involved in the movement just for the standpoint of being a child? Or did you come to understand, well, he won't leave this even if he wanted to. He's going to die in this movement. He's not going to go back to the United States government and be that executive, although he drove a Cadillac to the day he left here. But the movement was his life. It had consumed him.
Totally. And so he was married to the movement. That was his first wife.
Yeah.
And then he was married to my mother, who sort of took a subordinate seat, people think, because they didn't see her out there doing things. But who do you think was typing up all that stuff, making breakfast for all these people, inviting strange people to our house for dinner, making sure everybody had dinner, cleaning up after all those people had a meeting and left. These women of the movement ran the movement. They were the engine.
Yeah.
And so I was at Boggs Academy, and they would come and pick me up once or twice a year once I get in the 8th grade.
Explain to people what Boggs. I know what it is because we end up doing some work down there with a nonprofit I work with. But Boggs Academy was an elite prep school for black children, primarily near Augusta, in Keysville, Georgia.
And you'd get sent away there. And I, for many years, took it as my parents sent me away, and it was mental torment for me. But then,
because it's like on a farm, and
it's on a farm,
rural
and
area.
you in a dormitory, right. And there's a lady standing there with a belt. Like, did you get up, put on your hat for church and your gloves and your socks? Right. Go over there, take that pig slaughtering class. But that's where I met acting from Miss Brown in drama class, and I started winning awards all over the state. And that's where I met the idea that my dad was never going to be one of those kind of daddies. Yeah. To go home, come home, take off your shoes, watch your little ball, go on a we never went on a vacation. Oh, wow. He took us one time to New York City, and I saw Sammy Davis Jr. on Broadway. So these men and women, I don't know if we have people today and where they are who will give their whole lives to something that's dangerous for them and their families, but they have a purpose and a reason. And that's what you need in life. You need a purpose. Just like Joe Boone had when he did that work with those blind, with both of my father's parents were blind in Attapulgos, Georgia. And they raised him down there until he got in a fight with a white man and ran away. But that's why when I found out he was doing that. So what is that? What makes you give your whole life to something? Because they did that. And the women made sure the children got raised.
We're going to come back to the women and the men's lives. Andrea, for you, looking at your dad and his ministry and his work, what do you think for him was a major accomplishment? When he got home, what was he like? When was he at his best? Right? What did he like to do? Take us behind the scenes of Joe Boone. What did he love to eat? What did he love to do?
He loved to cook breakfast. He would cook my sister and my mother. He would cook us breakfast. He would pay us to read books. He wanted my sister and me to read books, and he would choose the books. And they were big books. And at the time, $50 was a lot of money. So we would read books. It would take me 4 to 5 days, and I would be finished with that book because I wanted to cash in. So he wanted us to learn. He was big on education. The time that I do regret my father being in the movement was a night when my mother and my sister got a call from Holy Family Hospital. And we thought that my father had been shot.
Right.
And we panicked. It was 6 hours of not knowing what was going on. And it was Arthur Langford and Willie Ricks. Yeah. And we lived about 5 minutes from the hospital. But my mother knew not to go. So we just waited on others to call us and say, he's safe. But my father went to Thornton Mortuary, knocked on the door. And said, we've got to get him to the hospital. And behind that door was Willie Watkins, and had a hearse with the ambulance and took them to Grady Hospital and saved both of their lives. So that is a time that I think that was the most traumatic day of our lives when we thought that my father was gone. And your father was there as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's go to the women of the movement, because talking to the sons, one of the things they said, the women's roles was so critical to the family, and that they were the glue that held it all together. You both have mentioned it. And tell us about your mom, Juanita. She was, in her own right, she was bad sister herself now. Hosea leaves the state house and tags his wife, your mother, in, and she goes to serve in the state house and did a phenomenal job. Tell us about the house dynamics with Dad being gone so often. What was Mom's role? You talked about kind of the nurturer, the kind of person who provided the food for all the folks who came over. How important was she in the household?
If she hadn't been there, we'd probably be out on the street right now somewhere. Because she definitely was the one that raised us. And since she was a librarian, you couldn't say, I'm finna, or we talked like we had English classes. She would make sure that, and two of my siblings became attorneys.
Yeah.
My sister Yolanda and my brother Jose, and my brother Andre worked for DeKalb County as a head main accountant for many, many years. So she was on top of the education. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what they thought I was supposed to come out as after being at Boggs Academy for but I came out rocking and rolling as an actress. Mm-hmm. And they were like, "What? You can't be an actress." And I have 50 films that I've done or more, things different. But the point is, she brought her mother to live with us. Mm. And so we had 4 generations in that house at one time. And we just didn't question anything she said. My brothers gave her the most problems because she was like, "You're not bringing no girls in this house and no girl babies." And they didn't. Mm-hmm. You know, they weren't that kind of men. But her focus was on my sister Yolanda. Yeah. Turning her into the lady that it was too late to try me. Turning her into the lady that she has become. She has degrees in music, she has Juris Doctorate, she has other degrees, and she's doing very well for herself. So that she was very successful at that. And if she had to pick up an cornbread pan and throw it at you, she would do so. Because both of my brothers were over 6 feet, and she barely reached 5. Mm-hmm. So don't tell a book by its size. There's fierceness in there, and if you prick the wrong thing, you know, you will find out. So she was like a woman of destiny, because whatever was necessary, she didn't want to go down to the state legislature. She was like, "Oh no, I'm not a politician." But he said, "No, we don't have anybody to put in there right now. You go down there and then we'll get back with you." So she won the election and stayed down there 16 years. Yeah. She sat right next to Tyrone Brooks, and he took care of her. Mm-hmm. So these women, to talk about the civil rights movement or Black history or anything without focusing on the women, you've only told a third of the story.
You've done a serious injustice. Your dad comes here, as I remember you talking to him or you, buys a house in Kirkwood. And that's in Eastlake. But Eastlake. That's what I meant, Eastlake. And he even tells a story, I believe, that they didn't want him there because then, like it is now, it was predominantly white. Yes. But he said, "We want that house, and that's where we're going to stay." And
they went in an uproar. Every time we do anything in that house, they go in an uproar. They go down to City Hall and they play.
Even to this day. You all have created that house to be Hosea House. Tell us about that.
Yes.
It kind of served as a museum, a repository for his retelling of his story. Tell us, but when he first gets the house,
When he
what
first
was
gets
it
the
like?
all-white neighborhood, never had a black person within 20 miles, and he walks in and he looks around and he says, I want my family to live there. And they start laughing because they say, oh, you don't have the money to put your family there. And he said, I want my family to live there. Beautiful 2-story house with a yard and a basketball court, and we all had our own rooms, and it was anathema to the idea that you have to be poor if you're a civil rights leader,
Right.
because you don't. Dick Gregory said you can't help the poor if you poor.
Wanna, your daddy told me that. I tell this story at a time. It was one of the things he said to me that I didn't understand because I was 21 years old. He said, I'm going to tell you, young man, the best way to help the poor is not be one of them. And I didn't have the intellect to stop him. But later on, I come to understand what it means. He said, look, if you run into a man who's hungry, he don't want to hear nothing about your philosophy or your plans. He want what from you? A sandwich first. You got to feed him. And if you don't have anything in your pocket and he don't have anything in his pocket, then
Both of y'all
y'all ain't gonna get
done
too far.
for.
Right.
Yeah.
So he moves in, settles in
mother
classic
decorates.
Hosea fashion.
Yes.
We're not going nowhere. Deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially when the people that he would run into at his office start coming to the house. So you had homeless people at the back door trying to get some food. You had somebody got evicted, knocking on the front door trying to get some help because they got evicted. And when they saw this activity around the house, then they get up in a furor, go down to City Hall and complain. But we ignored them completely. We knew what that house was for. And if we have our dream life, it's going to be a museum where people can come and visit. It's going to be a community center where people can learn about the history of the state and through these lives of these men and women. And I got in trouble the other day on the internet because I said you need to remember your ancestors. And I got a letter from a pastor that said, you out there talking to dead people. My thing is, if you don't know where you came from, then who are you? And she spent a lot of time. She showed us all the pictures of on the woman's side. And the men's, we didn't know how far back the men went, but we knew decades and decades how far the women went. It's important to a child of the movement.
Yeah, to forget your past's betrayal. There's another one your daddy's saying. Andrea, when it came to home, who were some of the people who showed up at the house? That you would see on a regular basis around the table.
The civil rights children pretty much grew up together.
Right.
We grew up together. I grew up so many nights in the Abernathy home with Wandalin, Donzale, Ralph, Kwame. I would always visit Hosea Williams, Yolanda, and my sister were closer in age. So they had a really tight bond. They would be in beauty pageants together, and they have a great relationship today. Being a daughter of the civil rights movement, we are like family. We are really like family. We love each other. We've spent so much time together.
And we can be sad. I'm sorry to break in. But we can be sad for each other if we don't want to show up somewhere. I absolutely understand the tears that are right back in my head right now. And every time Evelyn, Laura, and I see each other, we just start crying. So she said, no, I'm not coming down there because I am not going to cry all through 2, 3 o'clock. There is still a burden in there. There's a pain in there, right? And it makes you always strive to do, and you never think you've done enough.
It's never enough. You picked up your daddy's legacy. It didn't fall. You picked it up immediately. Hosea Feed the Hungry, the largest feeding program in the southeastern United States.
Direct
you all
to
went
table.
From 1 or 2 times a year to open really 6, 7. Do y'all even close on Sunday now? Y'all are
Yes.
all okay. Y'all are a major operation. You could have walked away from it and said, "Look, let somebody else pick it up. Maybe one of the brothers or sisters or cousin. I'm gonna pursue my acting career." You glazed over your acting career, but you've been in some of the biggest movies, from Ray to tell us some of the other movies you've been in.
Medea's Family Reunion, Southern Comfort, Queen Sugar on TV, and many others.
Why didn't you just walk away and say, "Hey, look, my daddy gave his life to this. He did a great job. Time for me to just coast and do some more acting"?
I don't know the answer to that question, because when he died, my mother just died like a week before. So we were in some kind of psychological state that no one was counseling us. No one was telling us how we ought to feel. And I went to the office after his death, and I saw his chair. And I sat in it, and then I had to jump up and run out of it, because it started enfolding me. And then I said, I heard, "Not that chair. You'll have your own chair." So I had that chair moved back into the warehouse, and they brought me another chair. But I didn't have anywhere else to go but into the movement. I wasn't this kind of gregarious woman who was all this advocacy and all. No, I was an artist.
Yeah.
But when you're called and pulled like that, you don't even second guess it. You just sit there and wait to see what destiny will do. And the people started coming, asking for what they needed. And that shaped our programs. And now we're open year-round, doing those programs and expanding into the future, innovation in the future. But if Daddy was a little office by himself, paying people's rent, getting their cars fixed, calling to get them a job.
Certainly.
Don't nobody answer the phone if I called to get them a job. But, that was his thing. That Joe Boone did the same thing.
He loved
So
doing
we watched them. And so we figured that's what you're supposed to do.
Well, let's go to the nexus and going back to the civil rights movement. Both of your fathers worked with Dr. King. What did your dad, what did Reverend Boone tell you about what that work was and who King was and Abernathy and the others? What did he say about a man who would kind of shake up the world, but he had to do it in partnership with all the others? What was his thoughts about Dr. King?
My father was very proud of Dr. King. I know he was proud of Dr. King because he wore a button with Martin Luther King's face on it. And I thought that was strange. And he would always say Martin this and Martin that. So I know he was proud of him. He believed in him. He respected him. But I remember my father and Hosea Williams having robust conversations on a daily basis. I can't remember what the conversations were about, but they were robust and long conversations on the phone. So I suspect it was, what was going wrong in the world and what we needed to correct,
right.
and what was the next project.
Yeah. Liz, your dad is in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968, at the Lorraine Motel. He and Dr. King and Abernathy and Rosie Greer, I believe, is there, Andy Young. They are, as that day went, having a pillow fight. They're joking and laughing and getting ready to go to dinner with Billy Cowles at Billy Cowles' house. Dr. King is in a jovial mood on that day. What did your dad tell you about that particular day And what do you remember him telling you about April 4th, 1968?
Well, he was getting ready to, because see, Martin King went to Memphis with no staff, no plan, no security, no organization, and all his staff members, Andy, Bevel, were telling him, Bernard, Lafayette, don't go to Memphis. We're not ready yet. Let us, he said, those garbage men are calling me and I'm going. So he left them and came on to Memphis by himself. And so they all had to pack up everything right quick and get to Memphis. It was a pivotal moment, and I think he knew it was going to be a pivotal moment. So all he wanted to do was sort of eat and listen to his favorite music and get a jacket if it's going to be too cool. And so the security was lax, in a sense. But the way that sniper shot that bullet from blocks away, and then everybody felt bad. They felt guilty because they felt that they had not protected him. And you don't live that down. You don't live that down. That stays with you forever. So, I mean, he told me that he shouldn't have been there, that we didn't want him to be there, but that he insisted on going. But he was there on that balcony. And when the shot came through, they didn't even hear the bullet. It was so silent. Next thing they knew, so then they start pointing. Well, where did it come from? And that's how we know it was a sniper that had been exquisitely trained. Mm-hmm. And my dad, they had to send him out of the country. That's why I have on this medallion. He minted this medallion, and they sent him on a 17-country trip to give this to the heads of different governments. He went to China. He was the first black man to enter China since United States-China relations broke open. He went to Ethiopia. He went to Kenya. A lot of the countries were in Africa, so that they thought by the time he got back, he would have cooled down a little bit, and he wouldn't be talking so much about the United States government, and he'd just go on about his business. But by the time he got back, it was done. SCLC on Auburn Avenue was done. And he's walking down the street, trying to figure out what to do, and he runs into a homeless man eating out of a trash can, and he says to the man, "Why are you eating out of the trash can?" He said, "Because I haven't, in Atlanta with all this money, I haven't eaten in 3 days." And that's what started his services to the homeless.
Post April 4th, tell what Joe Boone was doing after King is assassinated. What does he do with the movement? What does his work look like after King?
Did hear that he started showing up at SCLC every day. Every day he would go to work. To the office in Atlanta. And Zanona Clayton told me that story, that my father she would greet him, and he would come to work every day. And I assumed that they were trying to figure out what to do, how to get things back going. So he worked every day.
So after Andrea, after 68, your dad is going to SCLC daily. Talk about some of the things he was working on in his last days. What became his kind of next project? What did he pick up after that?
I believe helping those addicted to heroin. Get off of heroin. I think that was a big project that he took on. And I hear about the different grants that they applied for that enabled him to purchase homes so that those folks could live there and live together. folks that were his counselors. I would run into them and they said, hey, I used to work at the Harambe house with your father, and we helped so many people. Bill Land, who was a United Church of Christ pastor, was involved with that. So I believe that at that point, my father shifted to helping those get off of drugs that were drug addicted, and also bringing them into Rush Memorial Congregational Church.
Yeah. Arthur Langford comes after him to Rush. And when he comes, I work very closely with Arthur. When he came, that was Paul. Paul was a homeless man who lived under the church some days, in the church some days. And Paul was just a figure because I was close to Arthur. Every day, Paul would come, and either Arthur would send him to get them something to eat, or he would have something for Paul, because Paul would, we all knew Paul. Paul would come to church, and I think he was a holdover from your dad.
And he would pay Paul. Her father would pay Paul to clean the church.
To clean the church. We're joined by Sarah Elisabeth Langford. Sarah, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good.
Just happy to be here.
Glad you're here, and we've been talking about your dad vicariously. Of all of these men, I knew your dad the best because I met him when I was 17. Arthur Langford Jr., born in Joyland in Atlanta, native of Price High School, Morris Brown College. Went on to be the youngest man elected to the Atlanta City Council at 23 years old. Had just finished Morris Brown good. Wrote a play about the life of Dr. King, was certainly influenced by Dr. King's life. And as Andrea Boone mentioned earlier, in 1972, she was concerned because a call came to their house saying there's a protest at Holy Family Hospital. And we just got word that some of the people who were protesting were shot. Hosea Williams was there. Joe Boone was there.
Willie Ricks.
Mukasa, Willie Ricks is there. And your dad is there. And it turns out the person doing the shooting was the administrator of the hospital, white administrator, and they were basically picking the hospital to ask that nurses and black doctors get to practice there. Your dad is shot in the chest, actually. The bullet goes through the chest, hit Willie Ricks in the side. I don't even know if you're born. Now, obviously, you're not born then.
No, I wasn't born then. Nope. So I just remember it from remembering like the scar on his like upper chest area, and then learning about experiences like that from you all, from Willie Watkins, who I guess said that one of his funeral cars was how they got to the hospital. So I wasn't born, but I've just learned so much about it by people who were there and knew of the story.
Tell us about your dad and your memories of him, because Arthur Langford became this staple in Atlanta of just solid leadership. All of you all are pre-Ks. Y'all are preacher kid. Arthur comes after Joe Boone to Rush Church. But tell us about your dad. Who was your dad to Sarah Elisabeth?
Well, my dad was really a fun, loving family man. And, you know, he passed away when I was 15 years old. So really, you know, I have vague memories of us traveling together as a family, of him waking up early and going to search for missing and murdered children. I was so young then, and so they really kind of sheltered me from a lot of like the actual information of just the dangers of what was going on. But I'm still learning so much just on a day-to-day basis. Like Councilmember Boone said, I'll run into people in the grocery store or anywhere who tell me stories of my father, or even learning through you all and your service and leadership. So I feel like I'm on a constant journey of learning more about who he was because he passed away when I was so young. So now there are streets. When you're driving home, there's a street
named for him, recreation centers,
Yep.
skate park,
Yep.
in his own neighborhood where he grew up, which is right adjacent to where I live. Your fondest memory, because I have memories of your dad with you, because I was with him most of his life up until his death. I'm working with your Uncle Michael in some capacity. He was a visionary. Arthur was a interesting, and y'all can chime in because y'all knew Arthur. Arthur would just come up with
great.
we're going to go out. They've been shooting up like Bankhead Court. We're going to go sit a tent up out there. We're going to just stay out there and sit up a private. I'm like, dude, did you just said they shooting the place up, right? You're going to go. And he would do those kinds of things. Talk about the man at home, though.
Yeah.
The dad, you're a teenager, you're 15. Talk about the Arthur Langford behind the scenes that people don't know.
I remember him most from maybe picking me up from school at Pace Academy, taking me to gymnastics practice, and then also just from sitting at Rush Congregational Church and listening to him preach every Sunday. And then, of course, as a little kid, I didn't appreciate just the lessons and the fun times and the interesting information and education I was receiving just through our relationship. But now, looking back on it, I think about those times just, from hard work and my gymnastics practice. And I ended up getting a full scholarship to the University of Michigan. Or just hearing those sermons on every Sunday and just now how they impact me as I make decisions in my life or try to impart knowledge to my daughter. So it's constant just remembering kind of lessons and fun times.
You mentioned probably the thing that pushes him to national prominence is the searches that he organized for the missing and murdered children. This starts about 1978, 79. I'm emerging as a 13, 14-year-old here in the city and was absolutely terrified because someone was snatching children off Atlanta and off the streets of Atlanta, killing them. Your dad steps right into that movement and says, I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for the city to respond to police. I'm going to start searching for and calling for weekly searches for these children. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people show up to help him. And because he was an organizational whiz and he had his brother Michael right there with him and a lot of other help, they organized food and transportation to get the people out there. What do you recall of that time? Because I know, obviously, I know your mom very well, and I know they didn't want. I was terrified in the city. What do you remember him talking about, or those days? Because that was scary times. Because just like these two, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, people were threatening him and telling him to stop and don't look. And what did he say to you? What you've learned about his involvement?
I think I remember most just feelings of fear and just being afraid, and then also just not completely understanding, but seeing a lot of commotion or people show up at our house before going out to search, and me just, I maybe was like 1 or 2 or 3, and I just remember seeing pictures of people searching, and they wouldn't really explain what was going on. But I guess the lesson is just any time in life that any of us may feel fear or not knowing what we're facing, stepping into that and having the courage to confront and attack problems with an army of a community, and knowing that God is with you and as you're facing that fear. So I don't remember details at all, but I do just remember a feeling of fear that was permeating our whole city.
Liz, the fear factor. We talked about your dad being fearless. But we know that they were bombing homes in these various places. There were threats made. Did any of that come to visit your homes?
Well, yes, we had crosses burned and all like that, but there are people who will tell you that they were in the movement.
Yeah.
And then there are people who shaped and started and was deep in the movement. That's your dad.
Wow.
Your dad's presence loomed
Wow.
so big here in the city
Wow.
that we are still reeling from the loss of him. So I just wanted to say that to you, because a lot of people say, oh yeah, I marched with Dr. King. You know, if everybody that said that would send some money to the King Center, she'd be ready. So we had people come and knock on our doors when we were at Eastlake, just banging on all of the doors.
Wow.
We had crosses burned, not at Eastlake. Most of this is in Savannah. But it didn't matter whether they did it or not, because you knew they were out there. And you knew that your parents were doing something that was going to aggravate them.
Yeah.
So you just lived your life afraid. It didn't stop the movement. It didn't stop you from doing what you're supposed to do. Fear, you just do it scared.
And for you, Andrea, we, probably even in this discussion has made it seem like it was just easy. Movement work is never easy. It requires a lot of sacrifice. We talked a little bit about the sacrifice of Dad not being home, and but was there ever a time when you got a sense that he was nervous or scared or anxious for his family?
I think he probably hid that from everybody because we were insulated.
Yeah.
There was always people around, like Gene Ferguson, Cisco Oliveris. I just think about the lieutenants, and they sheltered us. I mean, we had people there when we got home from school. My mother picked us up. There was somebody to greet us. So I think that our fathers made sure that there was a safeguard there. So it was just a strong, strong family bond between the civil rights leaders.
We talked a little bit about moms. Let's get to it. Your mom is a career educator,
a French teacher.
A French teacher.
40 years in the Atlanta public, 40 plus years in the Atlanta public school system. My mother lived in France. My father actually sent her to France for additional education. She grew up in Selma, Alabama, came back to Atlanta, and she was a helpmate, not just at home. My mother was in charge of the house. My mother was in charge of the house, but my mother had a strong hand in the church, keeping the church together, because not everybody in the church appreciated my father being outside. So she had to make sure that everything was taken care of in the church as well. As far as she was the pianist, she was the organist. She made sure that the children, that my cousins, attended Rush Church, and they were a part of the choir, and my mother was in charge.
When you talk to her, because your mother is still with us.
Yes, had a birthday last week.
Well, happy birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And always, I use my little bit of French that I know. Every time I see her, bonjour, mademoiselle, comment allez-vous, très bien.
That's pretty good.
And I had studied. And so, why did she say she fell in love with your dad? What about your dad attracted her to him?
Him being a minister. I think that attracted. I think she wanted a good life, and she saw that as a good life. Being the first lady of a church was a good life. So they met in Anniston, Alabama, as I said earlier. Were married there, moved to Atlanta. My father and all of his siblings lived on Cypher Terrace in one house. It was 5 of them. They lived on Cypher Terrace in one house. And my cousins grew up as siblings. But my father had to buy us a house in Adamsville because my mother said, I think we need our own house. So we ended up living and planting seeds in the Adamsville community. I attended LP Miles Elementary School, traveled up and down Baker's Ferry Road, but they sent me to Frederick Douglass High School by way of the Abernathy home. My mother really, she raised us.
Yeah. Sarah Elizabeth, your dad dies 1994. He's 44 roughly. You're 15. At what point did you realize how big a personality, as Liz said, that your dad is and was in this city? When did you come to realize that Arthur Langford was not a backbencher? This dude was involved in real movement. He had a heart and soul for the people. And I think about the three of y'all fathers. Probably, if you wanted to make them angry, do something bad to poor folks. They were champions for the poor. I was with Arthur enough to see this man literally, when I tell you he would give everything out of his pocket to poor people, I saw it. Whether we were on Auburn Avenue or M.L. King, if they said Reverend Langford, and everybody from the hustler to the prostitute, the streetwalker, everybody knew this dude. He could not go any place that they didn't know him. At what point did you come to realize this guy is, this is my dad, but he is pretty important in the city?
Well, I think I'm still coming to realize that, but maybe on the dedication of 166 and different things throughout the city, just realizing, wow, my father had a serious impact in just uplifting our city. And now it's, awesome to ride down Arthur Langford Freeway and think of him and talk to my daughter about him and just feel a sense of pride. But yeah, I think renaming that highway, and then just even now as I drive around in Joyland and see the skate park, the rec center, the street, just thinking about the magnitude of someone's impact and resulting in naming highways and sections of highways. Yeah.
Liz, your mom, let's go back to your mom. She picks Hosea Williams.
Juanita, yes.
Yeah, she picks Hosea Williams. Or did he pick her? Who found who and
well,
how?
He chased her for several years because her mother was like, no, you are not going to marry somebody in the civil rights movement. She was actually in Washington, D.C. Her job was to write the letters to the families of the soldiers that had died in the war and tell them that their relative had passed and how much the United States government appreciated their service. And she just couldn't do that anymore. It got depressing. So she came to Atlanta and started going to Atlanta University, and that's where they met over there at one of those years. Him at Morris Brown. And her at Atlanta University. But the way he got around all of that was to get her mother. She loved ice cream. So he would bring her ice cream every day. Every day he would come in with a different kind of ice cream. Oh, Miss Terry, you like this ice cream? Oh, you don't like that? Okay, I'll bring you what you want. Eventually he had her heart. And she trusted him. And they had a beautiful wedding. And what she married into, I don't think she even realized.
Your dad had an assistant, Terry. Y'all just memorialize her. But everywhere he went, he had a collection of people who, if you looked at them, some would say they were the unloved, the unwanted, the rejected. And you kept them around until the security, Shorty, the security. Everybody knew Shorty, the security man. Small in size, keys galore, a ring on every finger, and he would fight a saber-toothed tiger for Hosea Williams. Tell us about him and tell us about Terry. I love the way your sister put it at the memorial service. Said that her son never knew Terry was white.
Right.
Because she was always just
had that
there.
afro.
Yeah, she had an afro, and she was a movement worker herself. But talk about at least those two people who were such a part of Hosea's movement.
Well, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, you had a lot of white people who had left and become, I guess that was the hippies. Maybe the hippies were in the 60s and 70s. But they had decided that they were not going to be what white meant in America, and that they were going to be a part of something that made a difference. So Terry left her home in Michigan and came to the South intentionally to join the civil rights movement, and stayed with it until her death a few weeks ago. Amazing life, amazing. Like I say, the women ran the movement.
Right.
Hosea Williams was blessed to have her.
Yeah.
Because he did so many things at the same time. Bingo hall over here, a bonding company over here, getting ready to do a Hosea feeding over here. We're getting ready to picket riches over here. All these things, he was a multitasker, and he would create these things, and he needed support. JB was somebody that you would call a handicapped person. If you saw him, you would think there was something wrong with him, because he was a little bent over, and his head was bald. It didn't grow any hair, and he had this very small face. And he would walk up and down Memorial Avenue. They called him the mayor of Memorial Avenue, Memorial Drive, and he kept up with his money. You couldn't give him much at once, maybe. But every Christmas, he couldn't write, but he would give everybody a Christmas card.
Wow.
And it would have on there some scribblers like this, but it didn't matter that you couldn't read it, because you know it came from the heart of JB.
Yes.
My father took JB down to the Capitol with him. And my thing was, why are you taking JB down to the Capitol? You know he's liable to go off and say, JB's my bodyguard. And he went everywhere with him.
Yeah.
So sometimes we underestimate those that may be a little handicapped or little right of center, thinking that they can't think. They're human, they can think. Just engage with them, and you'll find out how best to love on them. Yeah, those were people critical too. And my mother really loved JB too, interestingly enough. And she was very particular about everything. Her dress, the way her house was organized and everything. And JB liked to steal batteries. That was his thing. And he would go through the house, get all the batteries, and take them outside. And she knew JB had been there, and she would have to just go buy more batteries. But if you try to put your hands on any of the family members,
wasn't happening.
J.B. Jones would attack you like a ferocious lion. He was security.
He was very clear about that. Andrea, your dad contemporaries, who did he? You say him and Hosea talked all the time.
Daily.
They didn't know how to just talk like two people. It's like,
yeah, it was very, very.
Who else did he hang out with? And what did he do to relax? What was relaxing time for him?
I don't remember relaxing time. I honestly do not remember him relaxing. I think even when we would go to Callaway Gardens or go down to Selma, he was constantly on the phone doing something. Constantly doing something, or working, or trying to figure out how to make a payroll, or trying to figure out housing for someone, or trying to figure out the next move for the blind center, and then moving towards Moultrie, Georgia, where we had nearly 300 employees. I would go down and watch all of these people sewing sewing. And I said, oh gosh, my father really owns this plant. So I don't remember relaxing. I don't remember that, but my mother was the balance. She made sure that we had fun. She made sure that we had everything that we needed and that we learned how to give back. Mm-hmm. She didn't want us to learn to be spoiled. She didn't want us to learn how to be selfish. My mother made sure that we gave clothes away, we gave shoes away, that we attended events where we had to give something back before we could get something new.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sarah, I spent a lot of days in your home. Your dad had an amazingly junky, organized office that had so much of his life. I remember sticks sitting in the corner from the searches, posters,
plaques on the
plaques
wall.
Everywhere.
Yep.
He had been all over the world speaking. Mm-hmm. I learned an appreciation for Nina Simone from sitting in his office, waiting for him. What did he like to do? What at home? What was he like at home? We knew the Arthur Langford. Probably one of the most naturally dressed. That dude was always. I think I saw him in tennis shorts one time with some tennis shoes on, but he was Arthur Langford was known for his whiskey mustache and his sharp dress, and the BMW that he drove, the 633 that I always wanted. Yeah. But what was he like away from the public?
I think cool and fun, is how he was away from the public. I'm remembering just, the downstairs of our home where my mom still lives and playing music like Aretha Franklin and so many other kind of classics that I learned through him. Working on his sermons in that back office, just cool, calm, and fun. I had a very good relationship with him. And when I hear you all talk about just different types of people in society, I just remember even my friends. Just having friends from all different walks of life, and my mom and dad would welcome them into our home and just never judged anyone, but just kind and fun with everyone. So
your mother, very accomplished attorney, what did she tell you about how her and your father met?
That's a good question. You'll have to maybe tell me. I guess maybe she was in college in Massachusetts.
And Mount Holyoke College.
Mount Holyoke College. My dad was at Morris Brown. And I think maybe she came down to Spelman for an exchange or something and maybe was interviewing different politicians and maybe interviewed him, and the rest is history. So I don't know if she was plotting.
A few years later, here you come.
Right, exactly.
I got an opportunity to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the United Youth Adult Conference. That was an organization that your father founded a couple years ago at City Hall. And we blew up a lot of pictures of him, had some of his robes because he was a preacher, his briefcase and some of the stuff that people could see. But one of the great pictures is your daughter Maria standing there holding this picture of your dad with a big afro, who she's never met.
Right.
What did she ask you about him, or what you've been able to tell her about who Arthur Langford Jr. is and was?
I guess I've been able to tell her just really about thinking about what you're doing to help others. I think that was really the root of my dad's soul and heart. To whom much is given, much is expected.
He said that often.
Yep. So really just trying to help her realize the responsibility that she has as a young black girl in Atlanta, and to love herself but also love her community and determine what she's going to do to impact her community. So she's 9 years old, so we have a ways to go, but yeah, just trying to impart that upon her.
Andrea Boone, as we get ready to wrap up in just a second, when you think about the totality of your dad's life and everything he got a chance to do, the places he got a chance to go, what's the most profound lesson that you walk away from, even the separation by death of your dad? Because Joe, your dad's been dead now.
Since 2006.
2006?
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember most about him? Or what part of him do you take with you every day? If I was looking for Joe Boone and Andrea Boone, where would I find them in your personality or the things you do?
A true heart for the people.
Yeah.
A true servant for the people. A person that cared about the least of these. A person that did not judge. A person that saw everybody as a human being, no matter who they were. My father treated everybody the same, and that is what I have tried to do in my life.
Yeah. Same for you, Elisabeth. Where does Hosea reside in you? Obviously, we can see it in your service because you continue that. Mm-hmm. But what part of him do you most? Your brother Hosea, and I remember the night he passed, I was at a Holyfield fight that night, and your father came in, and I think he had just got the news, and it was a tough night. Holyfield last fight in Omni, so that had to be early to the late 90s.
Late 90s, 98.
But he looked like your dad just spit him out his mouth.
Yes.
He had the looks of your father. But what do you care most about your father with you?
Yes, he had the looks, and he was going to be the one that the mantle was given to, such as it is. But being that I was there and I was a female, it looked different now, and people started wanting me to be Hosea Williams to them, and I had to let them know I am not Hosea Williams. I am Elisabeth. Two different things. But I don't think I could be happy, and I'll be 71, right? If I wasn't doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'd love to be on a movie set somewhere, making a big movie, getting all these accolades and everything. But I've done that, and at the end of the day, I ask myself, well, what did you do for anybody? So I'm like, why do I get back to that question? Can I just be out here and don't do nothing for nobody? It's impossible. You're guilty. You're not in your seat. You're not in your space. So he laid on me this lifelong feeling of compassion for the poor, and to be able to identify whether it's a racist situation or a classist situation. And that's very important.
People cast your dad in the position sometime of race, but some of his biggest supporters were white men that he got along with well.
White radicals.
All right. He Aaron Rent's guy, I forget his name, was a big supporter.
I know.
Alan Begner was his attorney for many years. He never saw himself as just, I'm typecast because I defend the poor and the downtrodden. He just wanted everybody to be respected.
Yes. One time, the KKK, when we had a Klan governor, what's his name?
Maddox. Lester Maddox.
Yes. Lester Maddox was passing a bill that gave people the right to march. And he wasn't getting anywhere with it because he was in the Klan. And my dad went down there because he knew he was going to have to march, and helped him get that bill passed. That's what I knew. Something is different about this guy. He understood politics, and he understood alliances and how you have to have these far-reaching hands into the community. And while he said he's unbossed and he's unbought because you couldn't buy him. People have thrown, I'll give you $1 million, Jose, if you leave Delta Airlines alone, or somebody else, or Rich's Department Store, or that. Now, Delta Airlines is one of our most wonderful donors, but he would not take the money. He was angry, sometimes with the black middle class.
Yeah.
But all in all, he saw all people as worthy of a decent life and a decent American dream that could come true.
Yeah. Wow. Sarah, for you and your memories of your dad, what would you want people to understand more about Arthur Langford?
I think I'd want people to understand just how in all of us there is the ability and the capability of making a difference in our own small way, some very small and some larger. But all of us have that same spirit that we can act upon of service.
He was service. He gave it all to the community. As we wrap up, reflecting back, Daughters of the Movement, sound like you all were had girl dads before it was popular. Were. Andrea, Boone, if you got a chance to have one last conversation with your dad, what would you want to say to him, or what do you want him to know about the impact that he had on your life?
I would just want to thank him. I am so grateful for the legacy that my father has left for me, my sister, my cousins, my mother. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for showing me the way. Thank you for showing me how to love unconditionally. Thank you for showing me how not to be judgmental, how not to be overly critical. And just thank you for showing me how to have an open door policy. Just let people come in and talk. Even if I don't agree with what you say or what you do, I'm still open to hear from you. And I'm still open to work with you, because I have to represent thousands of people in my district. So I just would like to thank him for making me a strong person.
Yeah. Would he be surprised that you ended up in politics and in public service at all?
I think so.
Really?
Yeah, I think he probably would be. He probably would be. My sister was the more outgoing person, and she was connected to more people than me. So I think he would be surprised.
There you go.
Yeah, my sister's a realtor. Had so many. It's just a successful career in real estate. But I ended up at City Hall.
There you go.
Thank God.
Elisabeth, Hosea.
Well, what I think about, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm just
No.
question.
It is. It's the same question. And on top of that, what would you want to say to him last, and what do you think he would be proudest about that you've done to keep his legacy alive?
I think I need to apologize, because I let things that were going on around him and what people were saying about him cause my time with him, which was shorter than I thought it was, not to be as rich as it could have been. He was in the news. Sometimes it was negative.
Yeah.
Around my household, there were things that were negative. And people were always judging him and calling him out and calling him, but then those same people would call him when they got in trouble. So first I would say, I'm sorry, Dad, that I didn't really know who you were. I didn't have a clue, even though I was right there with you. Because there's the dad that's the civil rights leader. There's the dad, just Hosea Williams at home making honey-baked hams for Christmas, because that was his thing. And he would fry the skin on the pig, and we would all sit around the table and eat it together. And he loved that. So I think, I don't know if I would have taken this role, this mantle, if I had been asked if I wanted it. But it has been so rewarding. It has been just amazingly soul touching to have people come up to you and say, "Oh, I was hungry and you fed me. Oh, I didn't have a place to go and your daddy helped me and my kids find a place." All the things that you can do for someone because of status, that's the only purpose for it. And I don't have very much of it. But what I do have, I just try to use it to get a little closer to the truth for a situation. Where is the housing?
Yeah.
Where are these people going to go? And that's why I have to be now and in the future more of the advocate that Hosea Williams was.
Yeah. Thank you. Sarah Elizabeth, your dad was incredibly proud of you. I know that for sure.
Really?
He was. And he doted on you, the only daughter, only child. He doted on you, and he said that girl is going to be a phenomenal gymnast. And so when I see you go on to Michigan and get a full ride gymnastics scholarship, I see you go on to be Miss Washington, D.C. and be in the Miss America pageant. Of all the things you've done, what do you think Arthur Langford Jr. would be most proud of you for?
I think he'd be most proud of me, maybe just for being a mom, a loving mom who loves spending time with my daughter and trying to just show her what's right in life. For having sisters like Elisabeth and Councilmember Boone to just admire and look up to. So I think just being a good person, a good fundamental person, a good mother, a good daughter, a good member of the community. Just having a solid heart and solid character.
Your daughter's standing over there, tall and stately.
Yes, that's
if you were introducing her to her grandfather, if he could be here, what would you tell him about her?
Ooh, I often think about that and just wish that she had an opportunity to get to know him and just have such a loving and doting grandfather. And of course, she had Kasim's father who passed away, Grandpa June. But I wish that they had an opportunity to just build a relationship, and I know they would just have so much fun together and laugh, and he probably would spoil her rotten.
Absolutely.
But I often do think about that, and just so thankful that I had those 15 years with him.
I just wanted to kick in this. All of us have a ball, you too, in our lives. I think that Daddy would be proud of all of us.
Yeah.
Because he would say they didn't drop the ball. Even though we might have been bouncing at the bottom of the hill, and it solely bounce, bounce, bounce. They learned they're not stopping the ball, and that's all we have to do.
There you go. May the circle go unbroken.
Yes.
Daughters of the Movement, let me, on behalf of News and Talk 1380 WAOK, let me tell you all, I have enjoyed just the conversation. You all have honored me for being here and for the continued sacrifice. I call on you all the time. Andrea Boone is my go-to person to get anything. I don't even call her mayor. I call Andrea Boone to get things done at City Hall. Elisabeth was my prayer partner and just a sister who I just love dearly. I'm so proud. And I just know your dad would be proud. Because sometimes I would wonder, would his work ever continue? Because they just ain't making them like Arthur Langford. They're not making any more Hosea Williams. They're sure not making no Joe Boones. Jumping out of that cab and coming. I was scared when Joe jumped out the cab and come grab the thing out, the gavel out of the hand of the chairman of the school board, but it was just what was needed. So on behalf of News and Talk 1380 WAOK, thank you all for being a part of this very important conversation. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for us. And I hope that you have learned something about the fathers as well as the family and these dynamic women leaders in their own rights. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.